Masechet Sukkah, daf 56, the last daf as we complete the Masechet. And we're going to have a number of topics, some of them a bit technical, one of them of very practical halachic significance, and one of extremely interesting historical significance. So we're going to be talking about splitting the show matzah. I know people usually call it the show bread, lechem hapanim. However, it's actually made out of matzah, which is going to be important for us. And that is split evenly on the holiday. Then we're going to talk about the order of brachot on Sukkot, on the first night and second night, Lesheba Sukkah and Shechianu. Which one comes first? Good, that'll be the practical halacha. Then we'll be speaking about the splitting of the show matzah when it's adjacent to the holiday, not on the holiday itself, when Shabbat is right before or right after, or a day apart, and then all year round. And we'll complete by talking about the splitting of the hides of Musaf, but that will go into a discussion of the priestly clan of Bilga, who was shamed because of something that they did, and that'll be the very interesting historical part of our daf. Okay, so just to remember, the Mishnah that we're talking about says that all year round, there's 24 families. One family is designated for each week to serve in the Bet HaMikdash, and that family of Kohanim, they get to do all the services, and they benefit from all the meat and the hides that come from that. However, there's an exception, 3 exceptions, which is the Shalosh Regalim. All Kohanim, all 24 families are invited to come. On those weeks, if there's any animal that's particular for the holiday, like the parim that we of Sukkot, that everybody shares equally. However, other items like the timidin and nidarim, nidavot, shar korbanot, sibur, we'll talk about what that comes to include, makriv etakol, then the family that's assigned to that week, the regular family, gets all the regular service, if it's not something that has to do with the holiday. There's one exception, and that is lechem hapanim, is on the first list of things that all 24 families split evenly, even though the lechem hapanim is not something that's special for the holiday. That's something that you would do every single week. So we're going to have to explain why lechem hapanim is split among all 24 families and is not like the korban tamid. Good. So that'll be our opening question here. What is the source for this, that all 24 families on the holidays, they all split the loaves, the 12 loaves. This is the last pasuk from Devarim 18 that we mentioned yesterday, and chelek kechelek, equal to equal. So this doubling word, kechelek avodah, kechelek achila, it means that there's something that they participate in the service of, and also something that they participate in the eating of. So there's 2 things that are shared, the service of doing it and the eating. Umay achila, and what is it talking about? Things that they would all share in eating. Ilema korbanot, that would be our first reaction to say that all the Kohanim, we mentioned that these 3 Pesukim are talking about the holidays, right? Because it says, me'achad she'arecha. So it's a time when everybody's coming into the same gate. Fine, it's the holidays. Now, I would naturally assume that they take part in the food of the korbanot. But ilema korbanot mehatam nafka. La kohena makriv ota lo tihye. A different pasuk altogether in Vayikra says that any kohen that is doing the service, lo tihye, it's his to eat. So therefore, I don't need a pasuk to tell me that if they share in the service, they also share in the eating. And this chelek kechelek doubling we learned for service and eating. Ela lechem hapanim. So this is what's distinctive about lechem hapanim, is that there's no service attached to it. Unlike an animal that you have to do slaughtering and the blood, the service of the lechem hapanim is the eating it. And so therefore, this is an exceptional item, and everyone shares. Good. Yachol af bechovot habaot shelo mechamat haregel ba-regel. Now, what about even, you might think that even animals that I bring, not for the holiday, but I just happen to bring them on the holiday, can the Kohen eat, can all the Kohanim eat those? We proved yesterday only that the designated family serves and sacrifices the Korban Tamid and Nidarim and Nidavot, but we didn't prove anything about the eating. So now our Havai Mina is that the designated family will do the shechita and the service of those, but maybe everyone can share in the food and eating it. Talmud Lomar levad mimkarav al ha'avot. That's the rest of the same pasuk, right? So they will receive equal share, except for mimkarav, whatever was sold by the patriarchs, literally, not like the translation here. So what does that mean? Sold by the patriarchs? Ani b'shabati v'ata b'shabatcha means the patriarchs. Sometime long ago, the Kohanim got together and they said, listen, instead of all fighting over who's going to serve, let's split ourselves into 24 groups. I'll get everything this week, you get everything next week, you get the next week. And so they made this deal, this transaction. And so therefore, anything that applies to that, meaning anything that they're doing service for, that means they also get to eat whatever they are preparing. Unlike lechem hapanim, for which again there is no service, and therefore that was not part of that deal, not part of that barter deal. So during these weeks, everyone can join together and get the lechem hapanim. Okay, great. We're going to come back to lechem hapanim, but we go to the next thing in the Mishnah, which is ba'aseret omer lo helach. Oh, this is also lechem hapanim. So on Shavuot, you have not only lechem hapanim like every week, but also shtei halechem. Lechem hapanim is made out of matzah. Shtei halechem is made out of chametz. Good. How do you remember that? Well, the one that's there every week, right? Lechem hapanim has to be there on Pesach also. So you couldn't have chametz on Pesach. Also, you put it there one Saturday and has to last and be fresh till the next Saturday. We learned way back that it miraculously stayed fresh. Also helps if it's matzah. So it's very thick matzah, but nevertheless, it'll stay fresher longer. Okay, so now we're going to get to this, back to this, but we're going to relate it to the following machloket that actually does have to do with Sukkah. Strangely, Sukkah here is the tangent that we're bringing in, even though it's Masechet Sukkah. Itmar, Rav Amar, Sukkah ve'achar kach zeman, Rabba bar Chana Amar zeman ve'achar kach Sukkah. When you're making Kiddush on the first night of Sukkot, and let's assume we're in Israel and there's only one night, so Rav says, first you say the beracha leshev basukah, and then you say shechianu. Rabba bar Chana says, no, first you say shechianu, and then you say leshev basukah. Okay, so let's see the reasons. Rav amar sukkah v'achar kach zeman chiyuvat diyoma adif. Says first you do sukkah because that is the obligation of the day. That's something special. This is Sukkot, so we want to mention leshev basukah first. And then Shechianu is just more general because we're doing the mitzvah for the first time. We have the holiday coming in. So therefore, that is secondary. So he says, essence of the holiday first. Rabba bar Chana amar zeman v'achar kach sukkah tadir v'shano tadir kodem. Shechianu, you say very often. So that's the rule. Whatever you say the most often, you should say first. And then you say leshev basukah. Good. That's the machloket. Now we're going to try to correlate it with another machloket about the order of berachot of Kiddush from Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai. We're going to end up saying that they're not correlated, but let's try. Lema Rav v'Rabba bar Chana b'flukta de Bet Shammai or Bet Hillel kamipalge. Det hanor banan. Devarim sheben Bet Shammai or Bet Hillel baseoda. So this is a braita that lists some of the differences of opinion between the two houses when it comes to meals. Bet Shammai אומרים מברך על היום ואחר כך מברך על היין ובית הלל אומרים מברך על היין ואחר כך מברך על היום. Bet Shammai says, let's say, pick Shabbat for example, you would say Mekadesh Shabbat, or the whole paragraph, and then you would say Sabri Maranan and the wine, which is not what we do. And Bet Hillel says no, you say, we say some Pesukim first, but that's not essential. You say Sabri Maranan and the wine, and then you say the beracha that ends Mekadesh Shabbat afterwards. That is what we do. What's the reason for each? Bet Shammai אומרים ברech al hayom ואחר כך מברך על היין שהיום גורם ליין שיבוא וכבר קידש היום ועדיין יין לא בא. So he says you should mention the day first because first Shabbat comes in, it becomes a holy day, and only once Shabbat starts, then that triggers the obligation to go get wine, right? Can't eat anything. Oh, I got to go get wine. And so therefore, since the day, the holiness of the day triggers the wine, I should mention Shabbat first and then the wine. Good. Bet Hillel omerim mevarech al hayayin v'achar kach mevarech al hayom shehayayin gorem lekidush shete'amer. He also thinks about cause and effect, but he says that once I have wine, now I can say kiddush. He would agree. Yes, the day is kadosh beforehand, but I can't say kiddush without wine. I mean, I could do it on bread, but then it would be the same thing. I can't just say, oh, I'm happy today's Shabbat. I need wine. And so therefore, once I have wine, that triggers the ability to say kiddush, and therefore wine is the cause of saying kiddush. Davar acher, or Bet Hillel has another reason. You say a blessing on wine all the time, every time you drink wine, but Mekadesh Shabbat, or whatever holiday it is, you say less often. Okay, we're going to see in the following discussion that really Bet Hillel requires both of these reasons. The second one by itself is not going to be sufficient for him. We're looking at the causal reason, really. So now, here's why we brought it. Lema Rav de'amar kebet Shammai. Rav, who said you should say Sukkah, the Sheba Sukkah first, to talk about the essence of the day, he would agree with Bet Shammai that you should talk about Mekadesh Shabbat, say the essence of the day first, and then only the secondary, more general baracha after Shechianu or Yayin. Whereas Rabbi Bar Chana, he said that you should say Shechianu first, because that's the more common one, and then Sukkah. So that's like Bet Hillel, who says Yayin first, because that's more common, and then Mekadesh Shabbat, because that is less common. So both of their reasonings do seem to line up. Now this is going to be uncomfortable for Rav, because that means that Rav is stuck only following Bet Shammai, which is not a good position for him. So therefore we break apart this correlation. Amar lecha Rav, ana de amre afilu lebet Hillel, ad kan la kamre bet Hillel hatam ela shehayayin gorem lekidusha shete'amer. Aval hacha ilav zeman mi la amrinan sukkah. So Rav says, I think Bet Hillel could agree with me also. Bet Hillel only said his statement that you should say the more common first, tadir first, only because there is a causal connection between the two. Wine triggers the obligation to say kiddush, but here they're actually disconnected. If I didn't have shechianu, if I for some reason couldn't say shechianu, let's say for example I said shechianu a few days before. Remember the opinion that says when you build the sukkah, you say shechianu on it, right? So let's say I fulfilled shechianu already 2 days before. So I'm not even going to say shechianu. Would I not say l'sheba sukkah, right? During kiddush, I certainly would. So shechianu doesn't trigger sukkah, and therefore they're independent and not the same. Bet Hillel could readily agree with my opinion regarding sukkah. Rabbi Bar Chana amar lach ana demre afilu lebet Shammai ad kan lo amre bet Shammai hatam ela shehayom gorem layayin sheyavo aval hacha ilav sukkah mi lo amrinan zeman. And Rabbi Bar Chana also would say he follows Bet Hillel, which is a good place, but if he can be according to everybody, that's even better. So Bet Shammai only says regarding that case that it would say Mekadesh Shabbat first, because the holiness of the day triggered the necessity to bring wine. So there's a causal connection. I wouldn't say Kiddush today, right, just in the middle of the week. But here, let's say there was no sukkah. Let's say I was traveling and I don't have a sukkah at all. I can't say l'sheba sukkah, but it's still a holiday. I would still say shechianu on the beginning of the holiday. So therefore, here again, the two barachot are not causally related. Rather, they're independent, and therefore, the logic that we just said before is not relevant. Okay, good. So now that we mentioned all that, we're going to tie it back to our current Mishnah regarding the division of the lechem apanim and the shnei lechem. Tenan ba'aseret omer lo helach masa helach hames. Our Mishnah that we just learned said on Shavuot the Kohanim divide both types of bread matzah, but first they say here's the masa, and then they say here's the chametz. The point is that every one of the families should have a little piece of masa and a little piece of chametz also. And don't just say, okay, you got masa, I got chametz. But here's what's important for us. First, they do masa and then chametz, right? And masa is the special, masa is the common one that you do every week. The chametz is the shtei lechem that's special for the holiday of Shavuot. So we would really think, according to Rav, that who says you should do the essence of the day first, Chametz is the essence of the day, shtei halechem, and masa is the more common. That should go second. And so the Mishnah, by putting matzah first, goes against the principle of Rav. Okay, it's really ingenious how this Gemara brings three different topics together and weaves them all in with each other. And it was really looking for the fundamental principles behind each of these shitot. Okay, so that's a challenge to Rav. Amar lecha Rav Tanaehi says, you're right. That Mishnah is I can't explain, but I have another Tana that I can go by. Rav, sometimes we say he is himself almost like a Tana, so he can argue, but we don't like to say that all the time. So the Tanya, Helach Masa, Helach Hametz. Tanakama says, like our Mishnah, Masa first. Abba Shaul Omer, Helach Hametz, Vehelach Masa. So Rav says, I can follow the Tana, Abba Shaul, and indeed, the Chametz, which is Shtei Halechem for Shavuot, the essence of the day, that comes first. And then, that like L'Sheba Sukkah comes first, and then Masa comes second. All right, now that we had that discussion, let's see what the halacha lema'aseh is, because we need to know this, because Sukkot's coming up soon. Darash Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda, lo kedivrei Rav, de'amar Sukkah ve'achar kach zeman. Interestingly, we reject Rav here, because after all, he had to rely on Abba Shaul. Ela zeman ve'achar kach Sukkah. Rather, we're going to say the first night of Sukkot, Shechianu, and then L'Sheba Sukkah. Okay, even though Rav Nachman said this, and Darash means he said it in a public lecture, which becomes official halacha, not everybody agreed. Rav Sheshat bered Rav Idi Amar Sukkah v'achar kach zman v'hilcheta Sukkah achar kach zman. So that's the bottom line of the sugya. First you say L'Sheba Sukkah, and then we say Shehechianu, which is in fact exactly what we do. I have a copy here of a machzor, and so on the first night we follow this Gemara exactly, and we say L'Sheba Sukkah, and then we say Zaman. But I'm sure, as you sure remember, on the second night we flip it around, which is very strange. Why on the second night in Chutz Ladas do we flip it around? So let's explain a little further why on the first night it's this way. L'Sheba Sukkah first. Shechianu. Why are we saying Shechianu? For two things. Number one, for the holiday. Every holiday, the first night you say Shechianu, and also for the new mitzvah of sitting in a sukkah. So therefore, Shechianu has to go last, because it's referring to both the holiday and L'Sheba Sukkah. On the second night, well, we say it again because it could be the first night of the holiday, right? So we have to say Shechianu again. But we already sat in a sukkah, so we can't say it on the sukkah. And here's the chidush. You remember that Shechianu on the sukkah can actually be said a week before, whenever you build the sukkah. Whenever the sukkah is ready, you say Shechianu. So the first night, even though if the first night was not Yom Tov, the fact that you said Shechianu on the Sukkah fulfills your obligation no matter what. And so therefore, the second night, we say Shechianu first, because we're saying Shechianu only on the holiday and not on the Sukkah, so we can say Sukkah last and then sit down. Right, so that's a beautiful explanation of that strange minhag, and now you can explain this to all your guests, hopefully if you remember it. When we get to Sukkot. Okay, excellent. So now we get to the next part of the Mishnah. Mishmash shezemano kavua ushar korbanot sibur. So if it's that their scheduled time, they do the one whose scheduled time it is, they do all the tamid, korban tamid, and then and nedavot, and then it adds and other korbanot sibur. So now our Gemara is going to ask, what else is this including? Right? Why does it have these extra words? La tuye mai, la tuye parhelem davar shel sibur us'ire avodah zara. Parhelem davar shel sibur means if the whole community made a mistake. How could the whole community make an error? If the Sanhedrin told them a wrong law, and then they realize, so then the Sanhedrin brings a par for a chatat. If this happened, even if it happened on the holiday, nevertheless, we don't say this is a holiday korban. No, it's a sibur, korban sibur, and only that mishmar serves it and takes it. Usirei avodah zara, also if the Sanhedrin makes a mistake and tells people to worship idolatry, and then they bring a se'ir, that also is a korban sibur, not related to the holiday, even if it happens on the holiday, and the regular mishmar takes care of it. And then the last line of the Mishnah was V'hu makriv et hakol, and that mishmar does everything what is this adding? This adds the leftovers that are put on the mizbeach. Right, we don't like the mizbeach to be idle. Right, if you're around for shekalim, this came up a lot of times. At some of the shekalim, the leftover money from the shekalim would be used to buy animals to fill the time of the mizbeach. We don't want it to just be sitting there with nothing. And so if there's nothing happening, we take these extra kaitzim, the dessert of the mizbeach. That also is done only by the designated mishmar and is not shared by everyone. All right, wonderful. Next Mishnah. Yom Tov HaSamuch LaShabbat. This is the last Mishnah. Ben milefaneha ben melachareha hayu kol hamishmarot shavot bechiluk lechem hapanim. So we learned previously that Shabbat Chol HaMoed, everyone shares lechem hapanim equally, all 12 loaves. Everybody would get half a loaf if they're all 24 families were there. But what if Shabbat is right before or right after? So all the kohanim, they're going to come in. So they can't travel on Shabbat. So if the holiday starts on Sunday, that means they have to already be there from Friday. So Shabbat, they're already there. What are they going to eat on Shabbat? So even when it's before or after, all 24 families split it evenly, the same as they would on Chol HaMoed, right? Both before and after, if the holiday's over, and then Shabbat comes right away, then also they split it. Now, but what if there's one travel day there in between? So the holiday ends on Thursday. So they could go home on Friday if they live near enough, but some people live far away, and so they're kind of stuck there. Or if the holiday starts on Monday, and so then there's only one travel day Sunday, so they want to get there beforehand. And so that's a little bit less important because they could go find somewhere to stay, but we want to make it convenient for them if they are staying over. So in that case, mishmar shezemano kavaya notel 10 chalot v'mitakev notel shetayim. The one whose its regular turn is, let's say before the holiday or after, they get 10. And the visiting mishmarot, we accommodate them a little bit and give them 2 of the loaves of the lechem hapanim. Good. On all the rest of the year, when it's not a holiday, just a regular time, the switchover from one family to the other happens on Shabbat in the middle of the day. And so therefore, they split it evenly. The outgoing, right, that was served in the past week, they get 6. And the incoming family that's now going to start serving also gets 6. That's Tanakama. They says, no, the one coming in gets an extra 1. They get 7. The one leaving, goodbye, only 5. The Bilga will explain why in the Gemara. The incoming family, they go in the north. The north is where they would prepare all the kodesh kodashim. That's where they had those hooks on the floor to hold the animals down. So that was a special area. So the incoming one does it there to show, okay, we're in charge now. We're going to be doing everything. And the outgoing goes to the south. That's where the ramp is. There's nothing special happening there. So that's kind of on the way out, except for Bilga. Bilga was one of the 24 families. The olam choleket badarom. They always go to the south because it's a desecration to them. They did something terrible, this family, and so we always want to remember them for dishonor. And so they never get to come to the north. And 2 other penalties, tabata kivuah, when you had those rings that are on the floor to hold the animal down, there were 24 of them. Every family has its own ring. Theirs was stuck, nailed, fixed in place, nailed down, so they couldn't use it. They didn't have the honor of using their own. And also, chalona setuma, every family had a cubby, had a little locker. They kept their knives, the things that they used, and theirs was sealed, so they didn't have the benefit of having their own window here or a cubby. So we'll see what terrible thing the Bilga family did to earn such a disgrace. And that's the last line of the Mishnah. It's unbelievable to end the whole Mishnah on this forever punishment of the family of Bilga. Okay. Right, but not interesting, not bad enough. Why don't they just kick him out? So apparently you can't just kick out a whole family because then you have 23 and it throws off the whole system. So we couldn't just kick them out, and maybe there's some good people in there mixed in. So instead, sometimes it's better to make an example of don't be like that. I think here we're kind of putting them at the end to remember always, right, the danger of going off the derech and being like the Bilga family, kind of like at the end of many Mizmorim, like Mizmor 104, Barachi Nafshi. It ends, it's a beautiful Mizmor, all about poetry of nature and the mountains, and ends, Yitamu Chatta'im Mina Aretz. May evil people, right, be erased from the land. So it just ends on that kind of striking note. This is a warning forever. Okay, so maybe that's why. Now, these terms before and after, I explained them according to the conclusion, but until we get there, what does it mean? Perhaps before it means that Yom Tov Rishon is before Shabbat. So then you have Yom Tov Rishon is on Friday and then Shabbat. And the Achareha means Yom Tov Acharon is after Shabbat, is on Sunday. Well, if that's the case, Hainu Shabbat Shabbat Chag, that's Shabbat Chol HaMoed. And we already know the law, Shabbat Chol HaMoed, they all split evenly. So you wouldn't have to tell me that, if Yom Tov was before the first day, but if the first day of Yom Tov was before Shabbat or the last day after, you wouldn't have to tell me that case. And so it can't be talking about that. Rather, it's what I said before when I explained the Mishnah. Beforehand means Yom Tov, the last day of Yom Tov is before Shabbat, or the first day of Yom Tov is after Shabbat. My Tama, and how come on those days they split evenly, even though it's not actually the holiday? Since some come early, some kohanim come early because they can't travel between, and others stay late because they can't leave yet. So therefore the rabbis made a takana so that they can eat all together. Okay, excellent. So now, Chal Yom Echad. The Mishnah continued and talked about when there's a day in between. And then we go even to the next part and talk about on a regular week, you have incoming gets 6, outgoing gets 6. The Yehuda said, no, the incoming gets 7 and the outgoing gets 5. That's what we're going to explain. These 2 extra loaves that the incoming get. Why? Why do they deserve it? Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Bischad Hagafat Delatot. It's a compensation for the locking of the doors. You see, really that Saturday, the outgoing open the doors in the morning. So since they open the doors, really it should be their obligation to close the doors at night. But they don't, because the incoming one takes over. So therefore, as compensation for the incoming one doing a job that really the outgoing should have done, they say, okay, you have to give us an extra 1 in compensation. Mark?
Yeah, it says here that they got an extra 2 loaves, but we only got an extra 1 because it becomes 6 to 7.
I know, but when you transfer 1, I get 1 more and you get 1 less. So there's a difference of 2, right?
Okay, so
yes. But you're right. There is, 1 becomes a difference of 2. Now, hold on, this doesn't make sense. Why don't we just tell the incoming one, listen, you get 6 today. Next week when you leave, right, you're the incoming today, but next week, the Shabbat, you'll be the outgoing. So when you're the outgoing, you'll also get 6. And then, so do a favor to the one before, and next week, the next one will do a favor. So pay it forward, right? Why do you have to demand getting your payment right now for something you did? It'll even out in the end anyway. And now we have a very important principle of finance. Amar Abaye, bosina tava mikara. A small but ripe cucumber now is better than giving you an unripe gourd. And even though a gourd eventually will be bigger and tastier, but you have to wait till it ripens. And who knows what's going to happen? Maybe it'll go bad. Maybe someone will take it. And you never know. The risk involved is not good. So therefore, right, the way we would say it today, a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush, right? You have a good stock, sell it today and take a small profit rather than a maybe big profit back in the future. So the same thing here, since the family says, listen, we did some extra work today and closed it, so we want to get our payment today. We don't want to wait till next week to get it. Who knows what's going to happen, what risks are involved. Great. Rav Yehuda, umusafin holkin. So Rav Yehuda adds something. We're going to reject his statement, but he says that regarding the korban musaf, they split the hides, right? The kohanim keep the hides, and so the 2 families, incoming and outgoing, split the hides. Question: Metibe mishmara hayoset osat tamid shel shachar u musafin. Mishmara nichneset osat tamid shel ben harbaim ubazichin. This baraita rhymes. It's a little poem. So the outgoing, right, the one that was serving the previous week, they do the morning tamid, and they also do the musaf. And the incoming, they take over and they do korban, the mincha tamid of the afternoon, and bazichin means the 2 bowls of frankincense that are placed on the lechem hapanim. So you see here, it says musafin is done by the old guard. Ve'ilu musafin cholkin lo katani. It doesn't say that they split the musaf. So Rabbi Yehuda, what are you talking about? His answer is, oh, this baraita here wasn't talking about splitting anything. It was talking about the service. And so, yes, the outgoing does the full service of the musaf. Didn't mention anything, so it doesn't contradict me. All right, he got away with that one, but now we have another source that he can't explain. I have another baraita from the school of Shemuel, and it does mention splitting up and doesn't mention anything about the hides of musaf. Musafin cholkin lakatane. Detane de Shemuel. Here's the source. Mishmara hayoset osat tamid shel shachar musafin. Mishmara nichneset osat tamid shel ben harbaim ubazichin. All that is exactly the same as the braita we saw before, but then it adds. 4 כהנים היו נכנסים שם, 2 ממשמר זו, ו2 ממשמר זו, וחולקים לחם הפנים. It says 4 kohanim would go in. They have to go into the hechal where the shulchan is. 2 of them from the old guard, 2 of them from the new guard, and they split the lechem hapanim. So this, you see, this paraita is talking about splitting, right? Because it mentions splitting of the masa. Vilub musafin holkin lokatani, and it doesn't mention anything about musaf. So here it should have, if it were true, and therefore it's not true. Tiyubta de Rabbi Yehuda, Tiyubta, Rabbi Yehuda is refuted, and we don't know anything about any splitting of hides. So apparently the outgoing would get all of the hides of the musaf. All right, and now we end with the historically interesting part. הנכנסים לחולקים בשפון. תנו רבנן הנכנסים חולקים בשפון כדי שיראו שהן נכנסים ויוסין לחולקים בדרום כדי שיראו שהן יוסין. A lot of things in the Bet HaMikdash are a spectacle. People are watching, and in certain rituals, when you see a certain thing standing there, oh, you know that what it's about. So the one that's incoming, they eat their bread, take their bread in the north, because the north is where they prepared the korbanot. So now they're ready, they're to be active. And the outgoing one, they go in the south where there's nothing going on to show that they are on their way out. Now, Bilga leolam choleket badarom. Tenor banan maaseh b'Miriam bat Bilga shehemira data. Here's the sin of Bilga. There was Miriam, the daughter of Bilga, and she apostatized. She went against the Jewish religion. And she married a Roman or Greek. She married a Greek soldier. Sardiot comes from the Greek word strategos, which is in English word strategy. That's the word you in Greek for a soldier. So she intermarried. And since it says Yevanim, it means it's going back to Greek times, which this is a very old story, probably 100 BCE or 200 BCE, maybe around the time of the Chashmonaim, right? This is around Hanukah time, seems to be the setting. כשנכנסו יוונים להיכל, הייתה מבעטת בסנדלה על גבי המזבח. When the Greeks came into the Bet HaMikdash, that sounds like the Hanukah story. And she came with the Greeks because she was married to a Greek. She came with the enemies and she kicked the mizbeach with her shoe. Disgraceful. And she said, "V'amera lokos, lokos. עד מתי אתה מכלה ממונן של ישראל, ואתה עומד עליהן בשעת הדחק." She said, "Wolf, wolf, until when do you consume the property of the Jews and you don't help them out when it's a time of need?" So just like she's comparing the Mizbeach to a wolf, just like a wolf goes and steals and takes sheep and eats them for its own benefit, so too, she says, the Mizbeach is taking all the sheep of Israel and burning them up and as giving nothing back. right? And people think that, I'll give to the Mizbeach and then, Hashem will help us. And she says, no, there's no help coming. So she denied providence. She denied the importance of the Bet HaMikdash and all the korbanot and everything, and kicked it in such a horrible way. I mean, this is behavior they expect from Greeks, right? But from a Jewess that intermarried, and she's doing this, and she's from this family, so they decided to punish the family, and they sealed their ring, and they closed up their locker, and they said, you always have to be in the south. So that is the story. Okay, now, okay, good. So you're already anticipating the question that, okay, so one woman did it. So what? Right. Maybe it must be so someone raised her in the wrong direction. So we're blaming the family, even though it was only one person. Another opinion said that the whole family, they always came late, right? They strolled in, on a Saturday afternoon or Sunday morning. Okay, we're here now. They didn't take the service seriously. And so his brother had to help out while he was entered with him with the members of Bilga, who had arrived and served in its place in their absence. So they needed their brother to help out. אף על פי ששכני הרשעים לא נסתכרו, שכני בלגה נסתכרו, שבלגה לעולם חולקת בדרום, וישבב אחיו בצפון. So Yeshevav was the head of the family that came right before Bilga. And so here you have an interesting case where, because Bilga was punished and always goes in the south, therefore Yeshevav always serves in the north. Even when they're outgoing, they get an extra honor. So usually we don't benefit one person, we don't benefit a neighbor because of the downfall of their neighbor. Right? You don't say, we say, oy l'rashav, oy l'shcheno. Not if you're a neighbor with an evil person, you get benefit, except for this case, because we had to downgrade Bilga, so Yeshevav got a little bit of an upgrade, but they were also deserving of it because they filled in for the extra time, right? They stayed overtime to make up for them. Now, according to the second opinion that they all came late, so it makes sense that the whole family should be punished because they all came late. If you say it's the first version of the story, that was one Miriam, and because of all of the bad things that she did, so because of one daughter, should we penalize the whole family? Amar Abaye in kedamre inashe shuta dinuka beshuka or deavu or deime. Because the saying Abaye said, if you're a child saying something in the marketplace, right, where that kid must have gotten it from must have heard it at home, got it from his mother, or he got it from his father. You see a kid, saying curse words. Probably at home they also speak that way. Nowadays, maybe it's not true. Maybe they heard it on the internet, right? But nevertheless, certainly according, if it's political or religious opinions, generally they get it at home. So they assume that the family was actually behind this. Okay, fine, that's their parents. But why should we punish the entire clan just because of one family? Right? Woe to the evil person, woe to their neighbors. So the whole clan, they're all part of the same group. And so, if you have this evil in your group, you should have kicked them out. You should have helped them. You should have, you should have changed their ways. And so you're coming along with them. So then you participate, and woe to a neighbor also. We are influenced by our surroundings, for bad, but also for good. A Sadiq has good coming to him, and also those who are near him also have good. In the printed edition, adds a pasuk shene'emar imru Sadiq kitov ki perima alelehem yochelu. Say of the righteous is good for him because they eat the fruit of their doings. This pasuk is not found in any manuscript, so you don't have to read it. Rather, they all and tov la Sadiq, tov lishcheno. Okay, two last points. Who is this Bilga? Do we know anything about him historically? So in the Hanukah story, the real villain of the Hanukah story, even worse than Antiochus, is actually a Jew named Menelaus. Menelaus bribed Antiochus to become Kohen Gadol. He was very corrupt and very evil, and he's the one that brought idolatry into the Bet HaMikdash. And he's the one that either prompted or asked for the persecution of the religious Jews. He was a very Hellenized, right, very secularized, anti-Torah Jew. Menelaus, what family was he from? According to the Latin version of the book of Maccabees, he was from the family of, you guessed it, Bilga. Okay, so I think that story is definitely what's something behind here. We saw the setting of this daughter of Bilga is fits with the Hanukah story. So I think Bilga plays an even more important role that we can reconstruct from other sources. So that's hugely interesting to see the name Bilga come up here and in the book of Maccabees, right, as the primary villain of the story of Menelaus. And lastly, this seems to be a strange place to end it on. So one reason, what I said before, is you want to end on a kind of warning. After all this Bet HaMikdash, beautiful things, you warn people who don't appreciate it. But I think there's maybe something else, that we end with the word lishcheno, right? Our neighbors, who we are near. And Sukkot is the holiday when we leave our homes and we're going into a sukkah and we feel the Shekhinah right above us. We're kind of going into Hashem's home and feeling that essence of spirituality around us. So I think that's a sense of Tov LaSadiq. We should surround ourselves, make sure our homes are in a holy atmosphere and not chas v'shalom around Reshaim. So in that sense also, the word Shekhinah relates to the Shekhinah, which is at the essence of Sukkah. And that brings to a close the Perek and the Masechet Hadran Alach Hechalil Uselika Le Masechet Sukkah Chazakim Ubruchim, for all those who began and completed this really wonderful Masechet. Look forward to starting Masechet Besa tomorrow. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen. Hazakim u'beruchim. So I think